The conference room went silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence where everyone holds their breath, waiting for someone to either back down or detonate. I watched him lean back in that leather chair, my leather chair, fingers drumming on the mahogany table like he owned every inch of it. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "I sign the checks now. Know your place," he said, each word sharp enough to cut. The board members shifted uncomfortably, some studying their hands, others pretending their phones had suddenly become fascinating. Nobody wanted to be the first to react, nobody except me. I reached into my briefcase, slow and deliberate, and pulled out a black folder. The kind lawyers use for documents that change everything. I slid it across the polished surface, the sound barely audible but somehow deafening. My attorney, sitting 2 seats down, leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. She'd been waiting for this moment for 3 weeks, ever since this whole circus started. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "She owns 51% of the shares." His face did something remarkable. It went from smug satisfaction to confusion, then straight through to pale realization in about 4 seconds flat. Welcome to the moment where everything someone thought they knew gets rewritten in real time. And welcome to the Payback Office channel, where stories like mine, stories about standing your ground when someone tries to erase everything worked for, actually mean something. This isn't about revenge. It's about balance, about showing up when it matters most. If stories about people reclaiming what's rightfully theirs matter to you, hitting that subscribe button helps more than anyone might think. Right now, this channel is climbing toward 9,000 subscribers, and having others along for these journeys makes all the difference. Every story shared is a reminder that standing firm isn't just possible. Sometimes it's necessary. My name is Alexandra Hayes, Chief Operating Officer, or at least that's what the title read before everything went sideways. Before that, though, before the executive office and the corner view of downtown Portland, there was a different version of my life. A version where my parents worked 3 jobs between them to keep the lights on, where community meant everything because it had to. Those roots taught me something crucial. Empathy isn't weakness. Understanding where people come from, what they're fighting for, that's the foundation of actually leading instead of just managing. Now, about what happened in that boardroom. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the culmination of 18 months of strategy, sacrifice, and watching someone systematically try to dismantle everything built over a decade. To understand how it all came together, the story needs to rewind. 18 months earlier, the company was different. Smaller, maybe, but solid. Hayes and Partners Technology Solutions started in a converted warehouse space with 6 people, second-hand desks, and enough ambition to power a small city. My husband Christopher and I built it from the ground up. He handled the technical architecture, the IT infrastructure that became our backbone, while I managed operations, client relations, and the thousands small fires that crop up when running a business. We were good at it, better than good. Within 5 years, we'd grown to 70 employees, secured contracts with major regional corporations, and earned a reputation for solving problems other tech firms couldn't crack. Christopher was brilliant, the kind of mind that saw solutions in patterns everyone else missed. Leo and Violet were young then, barely in elementary school, and family dinners meant talking about server configurations and client presentations in the same breath as homework help and bedtime stories. Then Christopher got sick. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It started with headaches he'd brush off, fatigue he'd blame on long hours. By the time the doctors identified it, stage 3 lymphoma, everything shifted. Treatment became the priority, the only priority, and the business had to take a back seat to survival. We needed capital. Fast. Medical bills piled up faster than insurance could process claims, and experimental treatments weren't covered. The company was valuable, growing, and we had options. Selling outright felt like giving up on everything we'd built, but bringing in investors, that seemed manageable. We could maintain control, bring in expertise, and access the funding Christopher's treatment required. That's when Damien Frost entered the picture. Damien came recommended through our corporate attorney, a venture capitalist with deep pockets and a track record of scaling mid-sized tech firms into industry leaders. He was polished, persuasive, and said all the right things. He talked about vision, about preserving company culture, about being a partner rather than a takeover artist. He presented a deal. His firm would invest $12 million in exchange for 49% equity. Christopher and I would retain 51%, maintaining majority control. "Your legacy stays yours," Damien said during our third meeting, his handshake firm and his smile reassuring. "I'm here to help you grow, not replace you." We signed. The money came through. Christopher started treatment at one of the best cancer centers in the country. For a while, everything seemed to be working exactly as planned. Damien joined the board as expected, brought in a financial advisor named Todd Cunningham who tightened our accounting processes, and introduced us to potential clients his network had cultivated. Revenue increased. The team expanded. Christopher responded well to treatment, his scans showing the tumors shrinking, his energy slowly returning. But something else was happening, subtle enough that it took months to recognize the pattern. Damien started scheduling board meetings when Christopher was at treatment appointments. Small decisions, things that normally wouldn't require full board approval, suddenly needed formal votes. Todd began questioning department budgets, asking for justification on expenditures that had been standard practice for years. "Just due diligence," Damien would say, his tone friendly but firm. "Investors need transparency." Then came the management suggestions. Damien felt the company needed a dedicated chief financial officer, someone with scaling experience. He had a candidate, someone from his previous ventures. That made sense, actually. We'd been handling finances internally, and growth required expertise we didn't have in-house. Enter Vanessa Killian. Vanessa arrived with impeccable credentials, an MBA from Wharton, 15 years climbing corporate ladders in Silicon Valley, and enough confidence to fill the building. Her first week involved sitting in on every departmental meeting, reviewing every contract, and asking questions that felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. "Why are we maintaining legacy client contracts at reduced rates?" she asked during a leadership meeting, her eyes fixed on the spreadsheet projected on the screen. "These accounts are costing us more in service hours than they're generating in revenue." "Those clients took a chance on us when we were starting out," I explained, keeping my tone measured. "We honor that relationship. They're also excellent references for new business." "Sentimentality doesn't scale," Vanessa replied, her expression unchanging. "We need to renegotiate or sunset these contracts." Christopher, attending remotely from home between treatment cycles, jumped in. "Those relationships are part of our reputation. We don't abandon people because they're not maximizing profit margins." Damien cleared his throat. "Let's table this for now. Vanessa put together a cost-benefit analysis and we'll revisit next quarter." The meeting moved on, but something had shifted. Vanessa wasn't just analyzing finances. She was challenging the fundamental philosophy Christopher and I had built the company on. Treating people well, honoring commitments, building long-term relationships over short-term gains, these weren't outdated concepts. They were our identity. Over the next 6 months, the changes accelerated. Vanessa implemented new protocols requiring executive approval for purchases over $500, down from our previous $5,000 threshold. Department heads started complaining about delays, about needing sign-off for basic operational needs. "I had to wait 3 days to order replacement laptops for new hires," complained our head of IT, a guy named Russell who'd been with us since year 2. 3 days for equipment that was already budgeted and approved. The new employees started this week. They're sharing computers. Meanwhile, Damien was recruiting for a newly created position, Chief Strategy Officer. Another role that hadn't existed before, another voice at the leadership table. He framed it as essential for our next growth phase, and technically, with his equity stake and board position, he had the influence to push it through. The new Chief Strategy Officer was Damien's former business partner, a man named Gregory Ashford. Gregory was everything Damien wasn't. Loud, aggressive, the kind of person who treated every conversation like a negotiation to win. His strategy sessions felt less like collaborative planning and more like hostile takeovers of agendas. We're underutilizing our client data, Gregory announced during his second week. We should be monetizing the analytics, selling insights to third parties. Our contracts guarantee client data privacy, I countered immediately. We're not selling their information. There are legal ways to anonymize and aggregate, Gregory pushed back. We're leaving money on the table. We're maintaining trust, Christopher said from his home office video feed, his voice tired but firm. Which is worth more than whatever short-term cash you're proposing. These battles became routine. Every week brought new proposals that eroded the company's original values, and every week Christopher and I pushed back, exhausting ourselves trying to protect what we'd built while he simultaneously fought cancer, and I tried to hold everything else together. Then Christopher's health took a turn. The cancer, which had been in retreat, came back more aggressive. The doctors recommended an intensive treatment protocol, one that would require months of his complete focus. He couldn't attend meetings, couldn't engage in company decisions, couldn't do anything except fight to stay alive. I need you to hold the line, he told me the night before his first extended treatment stay. We were in our bedroom, Violet asleep down the hall, Leo doing homework with headphones on in his room. Christopher looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that no amount of sleep fixes. Don't let them change who we are. I won't, I promised, taking his hand. Focus on getting better, I've got this. I didn't though, not really. Because while Christopher was in treatment, Damien made his move. It started with a board meeting I wasn't informed about until 6 hours beforehand. When I arrived, Vanessa and Gregory were already there, along with Damien and Todd. Our other 2 board members, early advisors who'd been with us from the beginning, looked uncomfortable. Thank you for joining us, Alexandra, Damien said, gesturing to a seat. We need to discuss the company's leadership structure. What about it? I kept my voice neutral, but warning bells were already ringing. Christopher's illness, while obviously our primary concern for his well-being, has created operational gaps, Damien continued. His responsibilities aren't being covered adequately, and that's affecting company performance. I've been handling Christopher's portfolio along with my own, I said carefully. What specific performance issues are you seeing? Vanessa slid a report across the table. Client retention is down 4% quarter over quarter. Project delivery timelines have extended an average of 12 days. Employee satisfaction scores dropped 7 points in the most recent survey. We're going through a transition period, I acknowledged, but nothing in those numbers suggests a crisis. Perhaps not a crisis yet, Gregory interjected, but trajectory matters. We need stronger leadership stability. Then Damien delivered the punch. We'd like to bring in an interim chief executive officer. Someone who can provide steady hands while Christopher recovers and you manage the operational load you're already carrying. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Christopher is CEO, I'm COO. We've successfully run this company for nearly a decade. And we're not questioning that, Damien said smoothly, his tone reasonable, almost sympathetic. But circumstances have changed. This is about supporting you, not replacing anyone. An interim CEO would report to the board, Todd added, his voice mild. Temporary measure until Christopher's back full-time. Our 2 original board members, Alan and Diane, hadn't spoken yet. I looked at them, searching for allies. Alan met my eyes, then glanced away. Diane studied her hands. This feels less like support and more like a power play, I said bluntly. Who's your candidate? We have someone in mind, Damien replied, but we wanted board consensus before moving forward. And if I oppose this, I already knew the answer, but needed to hear it said. The board will vote, Damien said simply, but we hope you'll see this is in everyone's best interest. They voted the following week. Damien, Vanessa, Gregory, and Todd in favor. Alan and Diane abstained, which might as well have been yes votes for how much it mattered. Christopher and I technically had board seats too, but Christopher was unreachable in intensive treatment, and my vote alone couldn't stop the majority. The interim CEO was a woman named Jacqueline Pierce. Jacqueline had the resume to justify the position. 20 years in tech, previous CEO roles at 2 companies Damien's firm had invested in, a track record of successful exits. She was professional, competent, and absolutely Damien's instrument. Her first act was reorganizing the executive team. She created a new reporting structure where all department heads reported to her rather than to me or their previous supervisors. She brought in her own executive assistant, a steely-eyed woman named Harriet who controlled Jacqueline's calendar like a fortress gate. "I'd like to maintain our weekly leadership syncs," I told Jacqueline during our first one-on-one meeting. "It keeps communication flowing across departments." "I'm implementing a different cadence," Jacqueline replied, not unkindly but with finality. "Monthly leadership summits for strategic alignment, weekly department updates directly to me, more efficient." "That silos information," I argued. "Part of our culture has always been cross-departmental transparency." "Culture evolves," Jacqueline said, "especially during growth phases." Every conversation went like that. Every suggestion I made got rephrased as outdated thinking or resistance to necessary change. My office, which had been central to operations, became peripheral. Decisions I'd normally be consulted on happened without my input. Emails I'd always been copied on stopped including me. I was being iced out of my own company, slowly and systematically. Christopher noticed during one of my visits to the treatment center. He was having a better day, alert enough to read the frustration I was trying to hide. "What's happening?" he asked, his hand finding mine despite the IV lines and monitor wires. I told him all of it. The restructuring, Jacqueline's changes, the way Damien's people had effectively taken control. By the end, Christopher's jaw was set in that way it got when he was working through a complex problem. "The shares," he said finally, "we still have 51%. "Technically, yes," I agreed, "but they're operating like they have full control." "Because we're letting them," Christopher said, his voice gaining strength. "Call our attorney, the real one, not the firm's counsel. I want to know exactly what our options are." That conversation led to Emma Sutherland. Emma specialized in corporate law, specifically shareholder rights and hostile takeover defense. She'd built her reputation protecting founders from exactly the situation we found ourselves in. "Walk me through the equity structure," Emma said during our first meeting in her downtown office. She was younger than expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an intensity that suggested she didn't lose often. I laid out everything. The initial investment, the 49-51 split, the board composition, the management changes. Emma listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather portfolio. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "They're executing a soft takeover," she said bluntly. "Classic playbook. Introduce investor capital, gradually place their people in key positions, marginalize the founders until they're either forced out or so exhausted they sell their remaining shares at undervalue." "Can they do that?" The question felt naive even asking it. "They're doing it," Emma replied. "The question is whether you're going to let them finish." "What are our options?" Emma pulled up documents on her laptop, turning the screen so I could see. "Your operating agreement has some provisions in your favor. As majority shareholders, you and Christopher retain ultimate control over major company decisions. Sale of the company, dissolution, changes to the fundamental business model, those require your approval." "But apparently not management decisions," I said, frustration bleeding through. "Management execution, no," Emma agreed. "But here's what they might not have considered carefully. Your shares give you the power to call shareholder meetings, to propose board changes, to replace officers. They've been operating as if board control equals company control, but it doesn't. Not with your equity stake. So we could replace the board. The possibility felt distant, almost fictional. You could reconstitute it entirely," Emma confirmed. "Remove Damien's appointments, bring in your own directors, reinstate Christopher as active CEO, terminate Jacqueline's interim position. You have that authority." Why haven't they moved to change the equity structure then? It seemed like an obvious vulnerability. "They need your consent," Emma said simply. "Any dilution of your shares, any new equity issuance that would reduce your majority stake, requires your signature. That's probably their endgame, eventually pressure you into authorizing new investment rounds that reduce your control below 50%. But they can't force it. Hope felt dangerous, but it sparked anyway. What's the catch? The catch is proof and timing, Emma said. If you're going to make a move like removing board members and restructuring leadership, you need to be bulletproof. They'll argue you're acting against company interests, being emotional, unstable. You need documentation showing their actions are harmful, that you're protecting the business, not sabotaging it. How do I get that? You watch, you document, and you wait for them to overreach, Emma said. People executing soft takeovers get confident. They start making moves that clearly violate the company's interests in favor of their own. When that happens, you'll have your justification. The waiting was brutal. Watching Jacqueline implement policy after policy that contradicted everything Christopher and I had built. Seeing long-term employees, people who'd been with us from the early days, start updating their resumes and taking calls from recruiters. Russell, our IT director, gave notice. 5 weeks after Jacqueline restructured departments, he walked into my office, the one I barely used anymore, and placed an envelope on the desk. "I'm sorry, Alexandra," he said, and meant it. "I believe in what you and Christopher built, but this isn't that company anymore." Where are you going? Not that it mattered, really. Losing Russell mattered. Where he landed was his business. Startup downtown, smaller, reminds me of us in the early days. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, everyone knows this is wrong. What they're doing to you, people see it. After Russell left, I opened my laptop and started a document. Every resignation, I noted it. Every policy change that contradicted our employee handbook, I documented it. Every client complaint about service changes, I saved it. Emma was right. Evidence mattered. Christopher came home from treatment after 12 weeks. He was thinner, exhausted, but the latest scans showed the cancer responding again. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. He could work limited hours, attend meetings remotely, start reclaiming pieces of normal life. His first day back, he joined the weekly executive meeting via video. Jacqueline barely acknowledged him. "Welcome back, Christopher," she said briefly. "We're covering Q3 projections. Vanessa, continue." No asking how he was feeling, no updating him on what he'd missed, nothing. Just straight back to business as if he was another remote employee rather than the company's founder and CEO. Christopher's expression didn't change, but I knew him well enough to read the anger beneath the calm. After the meeting, he called me. "Start setting up meetings with department heads," he said without preamble. "I want to understand exactly what's changed and what people need." "Jacqueline won't like that," I warned. "Jacqueline is interim," Christopher replied, his voice steady. "I'm CEO, set up the meetings." Over the next 3 weeks, Christopher quietly rebuilt his understanding of the company's current state. What he found wasn't good. Employee morale was at an all-time low. 3 major clients had declined to renew contracts, citing changes in service quality and responsiveness. 2 product launches that had been scheduled were delayed indefinitely because Vanessa had reallocated development budgets to cost-cutting initiatives. "They're gutting us," Christopher told me and Emma during a conference call. "Cutting costs to make the financials look good short-term while destroying the foundation that made us valuable." "That's your evidence," Emma said. "They're prioritizing investor returns over company sustainability. Document all of it. Get client statements if possible, employee feedback, financial projections showing long-term impact." "And then what?" I asked. "Then we call a shareholder meeting," Emma said, "and you take your company back." Preparing for that meeting consumed the next month. Emma worked with us to build an airtight case. We compiled reports showing declining client satisfaction, employee retention problems, and financial modeling that demonstrated how Vanessa and Gregory's strategies would damage long-term stability despite improving short-term profit margins. We reached out to Alan and Diane, our original board members, privately. Both admitted they'd felt pressured by Damien's aggressive push for changes, that they'd abstained from votes not out of agreement but uncertainty. "We didn't want to hurt the company," Diane told us over coffee at a quiet cafe far from the office. But watching what's happened since, I think we made the wrong call. Would you support reconstituting the board? Christopher asked directly. Alan and Diane exchanged glances. Yes, Alan said finally, we would. That gave us what we needed. Emma drafted the shareholder meeting notice, citing concerns about company direction and leadership decisions. By law, Damien and his team had to be notified 15 days in advance. We sent the notice on a Monday morning. Damien called within an hour. What is this? His voice was tight, controlled anger replacing the usual smooth friendliness. Exactly what it says, I replied, keeping my tone professional. We're concerned about the company's direction. As majority shareholders, we're calling a meeting to address it. This is premature, Damien said. The changes we've implemented are showing results. Short-term results with long-term consequences, I countered. That's exactly what we need to discuss. I'd like to meet before the shareholder meeting, Damien said. Clear up any misunderstandings. Everything will be addressed at the meeting, I said. We'll see you then. The 15 days between notice and meeting felt like standing on a fault line, waiting for an earthquake. Jacqueline called an emergency board meeting, which Christopher and I attended remotely. She presented a glowing report on company performance, emphasizing revenue growth and improved profit margins. With all due respect, Christopher interrupted, his video feed showing him at home but clearly engaged. Revenue growth driven by cutting client services and employee benefits isn't sustainable growth. It's efficient growth, Gregory shot back, eliminating waste, focusing resources. You're calling our people and our client relationships waste, I said quietly. That tells us everything about the disconnect here. The meeting devolved into arguments, accusations of mismanagement from Damien's side, counter-arguments about betraying company values from ours. Nothing was resolved, which was fine. The real resolution would come at the shareholder meeting. That meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, 2:30, in the conference room where this whole story started. Emma arrived an hour early, spreading documents across the table in precise arrangements. Christopher and I came together, presenting a united front despite the exhaustion evident in his face. Damien arrived with Vanessa, Gregory, Todd, and Jacqueline, a show of force that would have been intimidating if we didn't know our legal ground. Alan and Diane were already there, sitting on the opposite side of the table from Damien's group. Their positioning was its own statement. Let's begin, Emma said, taking her position at the head of the table. This shareholder meeting has been called to address concerns about company leadership and strategic direction. Christopher and Alexandra Hayes, as majority shareholders, have prepared a presentation. Christopher pulled up the first slide, a graph showing employee retention over the past 18 months. The decline was stark, undeniable. When Jacqueline took over as interim CEO, we employed 73 people, Christopher began, his voice steady despite obvious fatigue. We now employ 61, 12 departures in 7 months, including senior staff who'd been with us for years. Exit interviews cite loss of company culture, lack of leadership communication, and disagreement with new direction. Some turnover during transitions is normal, Jacqueline interjected. We've also made strategic hires. 6 strategic hires, I added, pulling up the next slide. All from companies associated with Damien's investment portfolio. All at salary levels 20 to 30% above our previous pay bands, despite implementing pay freezes for existing staff. Vanessa leaned forward. Those hires brought expertise we needed for scaling. They brought loyalty to you, Christopher corrected, which isn't the same thing. The presentation continued. Client retention data, project delivery metrics, employee satisfaction scores, financial modeling, everything we'd compiled over months of documentation. The picture was clear. Short-term gains masking long-term structural damage. Your point is made, Damien said when we finished. The company is going through growing pains. That's expected. It doesn't justify this meeting or whatever you're planning. What we're planning, I said, nodding to Emma, is exercising our rights as majority shareholders to protect this company. Emma distributed packets to everyone at the table. Inside, you'll find a proposal for reconstituting the board of directors, terminating the interim CEO position and reinstating Christopher Hayes as active CEO, and conducting a comprehensive audit of all financial decisions made in the past 7 months. Jacqueline's expression didn't change, but Vanessa went pale. Gregory stood up. "This is a coup," he said flatly. "You're trying to eliminate oversight so you can run the company into the ground." "We're eliminating a hostile takeover disguised as investment partnership," Christopher replied. "There's a difference." "You need board approval for this," Damien said, his voice cold now, the friendly mask completely gone. "No," Emma said calmly. "They need shareholder approval, which, with 51% of shares, they can provide themselves. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders, not the other way around." "This will destroy investor confidence," Todd argued. "We'll pull our funding." "You can't pull funding already invested," Emma countered. "And any attempt to do so would constitute breach of your investment agreement, which would open you to legal action." The room erupted. Damien's team arguing legal technicalities, threatening lawsuits, claiming we were acting irrationally. Christopher and I sat quietly, letting Emma handle the responses. She'd prepared for every argument, every threat, every angle they could take. Finally, Damien played his last card. "Fine," he said, standing up. "You want control? Take it, but you're making a massive mistake. This company was nothing before we came in. We turned it into something valuable. Without us, you'll be back in that warehouse inside a year." "This company was something valuable before you showed up," I said, standing to meet his glare. "It was a place people were proud to work, where clients trusted us, where values meant something. You turned it into a profit extraction machine. We're turning it back." Jacqueline stood, gathering her materials. "I'll expect my termination agreement and severance package by end of business tomorrow." "You'll get what your contract stipulates," Emma replied. "Nothing more, nothing less." They left, all of them, Damien, Vanessa, Gregory, Todd, Jacqueline, filing out of the conference room like a retreating army. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed felt different than the one that started this story. This one felt like possibility. Alan cleared his throat. "For the record, Diane and I support the proposal. We should have supported you both months ago." "Thank you," Christopher said simply. The shareholder vote was unanimous, because it only needed our consent, but having Alan and Diane's public support mattered for what came next. Rebuilding took time. We brought back 2 of the employees who'd resigned, including Russell, by being honest about what had happened and what we were doing to fix it. We restructured client contracts to restore service levels, even though it meant short-term revenue hits. We held company-wide meetings to explain the changes and answer questions, rebuilding trust that had been shattered. Damien's investment firm remained a shareholder. They still owned 49%, but they lost their board seats and operational control. They sent legal threats for the first month, then went quiet when it became clear we'd acted within our rights, and their lawyers couldn't find legitimate grounds to challenge it. 6 months after that shareholder meeting, the company was stable again, not where it had been before Damien, but getting there. Employee retention improved. Client satisfaction scores climbed back up. Christopher's health continued improving, his remission holding strong enough that the doctors started using words like long-term survivor. We hired a new CFO, someone Christopher and I chose together, someone whose values aligned with ours. We restructured the board with independent directors who understood that profit and principles weren't mutually exclusive. And we implemented new shareholder protections in our operating agreement, ensuring that what happened with Damien couldn't happen again. One evening, about 8 months after everything settled, Christopher and I were home with Leo and Violet. Normal evening, homework and dinner, and the beautiful mundane chaos of family life. Leo was explaining something about his science project. Violet was negotiating for extra screen time, and Christopher was laughing at something I'd said about the day's meetings. "Mom," Violet asked during a lull in conversation, "is your company good again?" "Getting there, sweetie," I told her. "Why?" "You smile more now," she said simply, with that devastating childhood honesty. She was right. The weight that had settled over everything during those months of fighting for what we'd built, it had lifted. Not completely, probably never completely, but enough to breathe again. 3 weeks after Violet's observation, Emma called. "Damien's firm is offering to buy out your shares," she said without preamble. "Full market value, clean exit for you, they take full control." "Not interested," I said immediately. "I told them that," Emma replied, "but the offer number is worth hearing. They're proposing $47 million. The number was staggering. More than fair market value, actually. Enough to secure Christopher's ongoing medical care forever, to fund Leo and Violet's educations through graduate school, to retire comfortably and never worry about money again. "They really want us gone," Christopher said when I told him that evening. "Apparently," I agreed. "What do you think?" Christopher was quiet for a long time, watching the sunset through our living room window. Finally, he turned to me. "I think we didn't fight this hard to walk away now, but it's not just my decision." "It's not just about money," I said slowly, working through my own thoughts. "It's about what we built meaning something, about proving that companies can be successful without compromising who they are." "So that's a no." Christopher's smile was slight but genuine. "That's a no," I confirmed. We declined Damien's offer. Emma delivered the news, and for a while nothing happened. Then, 2 months later, our largest client, Northbridge Financial, requested an emergency meeting. They represented 32% of our annual revenue. Losing them would be catastrophic. I walked into Northbridge's headquarters on a Wednesday morning, expecting their CTO, a woman named Stephanie Larkin who'd worked with us for 6 years. Instead, I found Stephanie, their CEO Marcus Holloway, and Damien Frost sitting at the conference table. My blood went cold, but I kept my expression neutral. "Damien, didn't expect to see you here." "Marcus and I go way back," Damien said smoothly. When he mentioned some concerns about Hayes and partners, I felt obligated to share my experience. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He'd always been fair, direct. "Alexandra, we've valued our partnership with your company, but we've been hearing things. Instability, leadership conflicts, employees leaving. We need to know our vendors are solid." "What specifically have you heard?" I asked, sitting down and placing my briefcase on the table. "That your company's in chaos," Damien interjected before Marcus could answer. "That you forced out competent leadership over personal vendettas. That your husband's illness has made effective management impossible." Stephanie looked horrified. "Damien, that's not what we discussed." But Marcus was listening, doubt evident on his face. "Is it true you removed your entire executive team?" "I removed an interim CEO and board members who were actively harming the company," I said clearly. "And I have documentation to prove every decision was made to protect our clients, including Northbridge." "Documentation can be manipulated," Damien said casually. "Marcus, you know how founders get when they're losing control. They can't see what's best for the business anymore." "Don't," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the room, "speak for me, or about my company, especially not to my clients." Damien smiled. "Former investor, I have every right to share my concerns about a company I still have equity in." "You have equity," I agreed. "You don't have control, and you're here trying to sabotage a client relationship because you're angry about that." "I'm here," Damien said, leaning back, "because Marcus asked for my honest assessment. And honestly, your company is unstable. Northbridge should consider other vendors before they're left stranded when Hayes and Partners implodes." The room went silent. Marcus and Stephanie exchanged glances. This was it, the moment where Damien's poison either took hold or I found a way to counter it. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Not black this time, just standard manila, but what it contained mattered more than presentation. "Marcus, we've worked together for 6 years," I said, sliding the folder across. "In that time, we've completed 247 projects for Northbridge. Our on-time delivery rate is 94%. Client satisfaction scores average 9.2 out of 10. When your security breach happened 2 years ago, our team worked 72 hours straight to secure your systems. We didn't bill you for the overtime." Marcus opened the folder, scanning the documentation. The instability Damien's referring to was us removing people who were actively damaging the company, I continued. Since making those changes 2 months ago, employee retention has improved by 18%. Client satisfaction is up. Project delivery times are faster than they were under the interim leadership. Those are just numbers, Damien said dismissively. No, I said, pulling out my phone. These are numbers, this is something else. I dialed, put the phone on speaker, and set it on the table. Russell answered on the second ring. Russell, I'm at Northbridge Financial with Marcus Holloway and Stephanie Larkin, I said. I'm also here with Damien Frost, who's suggesting that Hayes and Partners is unstable and that employees have been fleeing. You left the company 4 months ago. Could you tell Marcus why? There was a pause. Then Russell's voice came through, clear and firm. I left because an interim CEO installed by Damien's investment group was destroying everything good about the company. Alexandra and Christopher were being pushed out of their own business. I didn't want to work for whatever Damien was turning it into. And why did you come back? I asked. Because Alexandra called me the day after she removed Damien's people from leadership, Russell said. She was honest about what happened, what she was trying to fix, and asked if I'd help rebuild. That company, the one the Hayes actually run, that's worth working for. Thank you, Russell, I said, ending the call. Damien's expression had hardened. One employee's opinion doesn't prove stability. You're right, I agreed. I pulled up an email chain on my phone and showed it to Marcus. This is from yesterday. 3 companies asking if we're accepting new clients. All 3 were referred by current clients, including 2 that used to work with firms in Damien's portfolio. Stephanie leaned over to read the emails, then looked at Damien with something resembling disgust. You told us they were losing clients. They lost 3 last quarter, Damien said defensively. 3 clients that your team drove away with cost-cutting measures, I corrected. We've since regained 2 of them and added 4 more, net positive. Marcus closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. Then he turned to Damien. I appreciate you coming, but I think I've heard enough. Marcus, you're making a mistake, Damien started. No, Marcus said firmly. I made a mistake letting you convince me there was a problem here. Alexandra, Stephanie, and I need to discuss some upcoming projects. Damien, thank you for your time. Damien stood, his face flushed with barely controlled anger. He looked at me, and for a moment the mask slipped completely. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. You lost. And trying to sabotage our client relationships just proves every decision we made about removing you was right. Damien left without another word. The door closed, and I realized my hands were shaking. Adrenaline, anger, relief, all of it hitting at once. Marcus rubbed his face. I apologize. I should have come to you directly instead of letting Damien frame the conversation. You were protecting your company, I said, understanding it even if it had terrified me. That's your job. But for the record, Hayes and Partners is more stable now than it's been in 18 months, and we're not going anywhere. Clearly, Stephanie said with a slight smile, that was impressive. The meeting continued. We discussed upcoming projects, contract renewals, and expansion possibilities. By the time I left Northbridge's headquarters 2 hours later, we'd not only secured the existing contract, but added 2 new projects worth an additional $800,000. I sat in my car in the parking garage and called Christopher. How did it go? He asked immediately. Damien was there, I said. He tried to convince Northbridge we were unstable and they should drop us. Christopher swore, and I had documentation, called Russell for backup, showed them the new client referrals, and Northbridge just expanded our contract. Christopher laughed, the sound relieved and proud. Of course you did. He said it wasn't over, I added quietly. Damien on his way out. Let him try, Christopher said. We keep proving him wrong, eventually even he'll have to accept it. But Damien didn't try again. Not directly. Instead, we started hearing rumors. Whispers in industry circles that Hayes and Partners was difficult to work with, that we'd had internal turmoil, that maybe people should be cautious about long-term commitments. Emma advised documenting everything but not engaging. Defamation is hard to prove, and fighting rumors gives them oxygen. Just keep doing good work. That's the best response. She was right. Over the next 6 months, the whispers faded as our actual performance spoke louder than Damien's sabotage attempts. Clients who'd heard the rumors and asked us directly got honest answers about what happened, and almost universally, they respected the transparency. Then Damien's firm began quietly selling their shares. Small chunks to different investment groups, diluting their concentrated position until they no longer had a significant stake worth fighting over. The final share transfer happened on a Tuesday. Emma called to confirm it was complete. Damien Frost no longer has any ownership stake in Hayes and Partners, she said. His firm sold their last shares this morning. Who bought them? I asked. Small investment group out of Seattle, Emma replied. They're passive investors, not interested in board seats or operational control, just returns. So it's really over, Christopher said. We were both on the call, sitting in our kitchen at home. It's really over, Emma confirmed. We celebrated that night. Nothing elaborate, just Christopher, me, Leo, and Violet going out for dinner at the kids' favorite restaurant. Violet asked why we were celebrating, and Christopher told her we'd finished a really hard project at work. Did you win? Leo asked. Christopher and I looked at each other. Yeah, I said finally, we won. But the real victory came 3 weeks later, at the Pacific Northwest Tech Summit, an annual conference where regional technology companies presented innovations and networked. Hayes and Partners had a booth, and I was scheduled to speak on a panel about sustainable business practices. I was backstage before the panel when someone approached, Damien Frost. Alexandra, he said, his tone neutral, professional even. Damien, I replied carefully. I heard your panel topic, he said. Sustainable business practices, interesting choice. It's what we know, I said simply. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, you were right. About the company culture, the client relationships, the long-term approach. My team pushed too hard, too fast. We damaged what made Hayes and Partners valuable. The admission surprised me. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of fighting, Damien said. And because you might as well hear it from me. Your company's market value is up 42% since I sold my shares. The approaches we tried to eliminate are exactly what's making you successful. So congratulations, you proved me wrong. He extended his hand. I looked at it for a moment, then shook it. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Closure. Good luck, Alexandra, Damien said and walked away. I never saw him again. 5 years after that confrontation in the conference room, Hayes and Partners Technology Solutions employed 94 people, maintained contracts with some of the region's largest corporations, and had been named one of the best places to work in Portland for 3 consecutive years. Christopher's cancer remained in remission. Leo was applying to colleges, interested in environmental science, nowhere near the tech industry, which honestly felt healthy. Violet had discovered a passion for debate, which surprised exactly no one who'd witnessed her negotiating skills at age 7. And me, I was still COO, still working alongside Christopher, still building something that mattered for reasons beyond profit margins. The black folder from that shareholder meeting stayed in my office, tucked in a drawer I rarely opened. Sometimes, during particularly difficult days, I'd pull it out and remember what it felt like to be erased in my own company. Remember the choice to fight instead of fold. Remember that ownership isn't just about equity percentages. It's about responsibility to the people and principles that make something worth owning. Someone asked me once, during an interview for a business journal, whether I regretted bringing Damien in as an investor. Whether, knowing how it turned out, I'd make different choices. The question assumed regret was the lesson. It wasn't. I regret what we had to go through, I said carefully, choosing words that were honest without being bitter. But I don't regret the fight. It clarified what mattered. Before Damien, we built something good without really examining why we were building it that way. After everything that happened, we knew exactly what we stood for and why it was worth protecting. The journalist seemed disappointed, probably hoping for something more dramatic or confrontational. But that was the truth. The experience hadn't broken us. It had refined us, burned away the assumptions, and revealed the foundation underneath. Would I recommend it as a business strategy? Absolutely not. Nearly losing everything to learn what matters most is a terrible plan. But surviving it, coming through the other side with values intact and company stronger for the struggle, that carried its own value. Christopher and I talked about writing a book once, documenting the whole experience as a cautionary tale for other founders considering venture capital. We outlined chapters, discussed anecdotes, even met with a few publishers. But ultimately, we decided against it. We're not experts in surviving hostile takeovers, Christopher pointed out during one of those discussions. We're just two people who got lucky and had a good lawyer. Emma was critical, I agreed. Emma was essential, Christopher corrected. Without her, we'd have lost everything thinking we were powerless. That was probably the single most important lesson from everything that happened. Knowing your rights matters as much as having them. Damien's team counted on us not understanding the power our majority stake gave us, counted on us being too overwhelmed and exhausted to fight effectively. They almost won that bet. If Christopher hadn't had that moment of clarity during treatment, if we hadn't found Emma, if we'd believed their narrative about our own powerlessness, the outcome would have been completely different. But we did, and we didn't, and it wasn't. Years after everything settled, I ran into Jacqueline at a tech industry conference. It was awkward, obviously, but we were both professionals. We exchanged brief pleasantries at the coffee station between sessions. "How's the company doing?" she asked, and seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. "Well," I replied honestly, "different priorities than when you were there, but sustainable." Jacqueline nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I was doing what I was hired to do. Damien wanted efficiency and returns, that's what I delivered. "I know," I said, "because holding grudges serves no purpose. We just wanted different things for the company's future." "Clearly," Jacqueline said with a slight smile, "you won that fight decisively." "It wasn't about winning," I corrected gently. "It was about not losing ourselves." We left it at that, parting professionally, probably never to speak again. She wasn't the villain in this story, not really. None of them were villains exactly, just people operating from different values, different definitions of success. The real conflict was always between two visions of what a company should be. Damien's vision, profit-optimized, efficiency-driven, treating employees and clients as resources to be managed for maximum return. And ours, relationship-focused, values-driven, treating business as a vehicle for creating value beyond shareholder returns. Neither vision is objectively wrong, they're just incompatible. Trying to merge them, that was the mistake. Thinking we could take Damien's money without eventually having to choose between his priorities and ours, that was naive. The money helped save Christopher's life, though, so even calling it a mistake feels wrong. It was a choice with consequences, some good, some terrible, all educational. If there's a moral to this story, it's probably about knowing what's worth fighting for before you're in the fight. Christopher and I got lucky that we agreed, that our values aligned strongly enough to present a united front when it mattered. Couples who build businesses together don't always have that advantage. We also got lucky in our kids. Leo and Violet were young enough during the worst of it that they didn't fully understand what was happening, but old enough now to appreciate the lessons. They saw their parents fight for something that mattered, saw that standing your ground is sometimes costly but possible. "Would you do it again?" Leo asked once, during a family dinner where somehow the topic came up. "Start the company, go through everything with Damien, all of it." Christopher and I exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that comes from 20 years together. "Yes," Christopher said finally, "because the alternative is letting fear of what might go wrong prevent anything from happening at all." Plus, I added with a slight smile, we got to do that dramatic folder thing at the shareholder meeting. Totally worth it. Everyone laughed, breaking the serious moment, but the answer stood. Yes, we'd do it again. Not because it was easy or smart or recommended, but because the things worth building are worth fighting for when someone tries to take them. The company continues. Christopher and I continue leading it, though we've started mentioning succession planning in board meetings, thinking about what comes next when we're ready to step back. We've mentored several younger founders, sharing what we learned, helping them avoid some of our mistakes. And that black folder stays in its drawer, a reminder of the day everything could have gone differently. The day Damien sneered about signing checks and knowing places. The day I slid documents across a table and watched someone's certainty crumble. The day we took back what was always ours. Not revenge, just balance. Just showing up when it mattered most and refusing to be erased. If that story resonates, if standing firm when everything feels impossible sounds familiar, hitting that subscribe button at the end of this video helps more than you might realize. The Payback Office channel is built on these stories, these moments where people choose themselves over the easier path of giving up. Reaching 9,000 subscribers means reaching more people who need to hear that holding your ground is possible, even when it seems impossible. Thanks for being here for this one. Alexandra's story, my story, it's not unique. Plenty of founders face versions of this fight. Some win, some lose, all learn something in the process. What matters is making the choice to fight in the first place, understanding what's worth protecting and what's worth walking away from. The company still operates in Portland. Christopher's still inventing elegant solutions to impossible problems. Leo's studying environmental policy, Violet's on her high school debate team, and undefeated this season. And I still show up every day to lead a company that proves business can be both profitable and principled. Not because it's easy, because it's worth it. That's the story, that's the fight. That's what happens when someone tries to take what you built and you decide they don't get to win. Subscribe if this one landed. There are more stories coming, more moments where people chose themselves, where balance got restored, where the ending wasn't guaranteed but worked out anyway. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one.